The system's still sleeping. There we go.
There we go. Okay, like I said, Councillor, we're reconvened again after the recess. We are now committee of the, I see we still have quorum. Call the committee of the whole meeting in session for Monday, May 6th. After looking at the agenda, is there any discussion on the agenda? And should we lift that one with the cow? With the,
Well, you can do it when you come to that.
we can do it when we come. Okay, without seeing any, oh, sorry,
So
Councilman.
just a matter of procedure, should we not finish off then the council meeting?
We can finish that after the next council.
We recess that. We recess
will
that
Okay,
meeting.
all right,
That one's in
gotcha,
recess.
all right.
Monday here. So adoption of agenda, all those in favor of the agenda as it is? Okay, everyone good, thank you. Oh, this,
So it's a motion by Councillor Stewart.
yep. Oh, and that was a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart. Thank you. Carried. Oops. Thank you. Now we have a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart. Oh, so, wait, this,
You present the motion as it was on the agenda, Mr. Mayor.
okay.
And then if anyone wants to make a motion to
Ah.
postpone consideration,
Okay.
then that would be in order.
Okay, there we go. So this motion put forward by Councillor Stewart. The Committee of the Whole received this report on 1120 Hay Street.
Can we just have disclosure of pecuniary interest
Oh,
first,
I'm
please?
sorry, did I not say that? I guess I did not. Sorry, that's the number 3. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Does anyone have a pecuniary interest after looking at the agenda? Yes, Councilor Wayne.
Yes, the way the
Yes.
agenda says, I live 6 properties from the old arena, and any decision regarding the sale of the property may have a positive or negative effect on the value of our personal residence.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to vote on that right now, Councilor, so you have to go and wait out in the hall? Yes, you
On the
have to.
motion to postpone, no, he'll be fine in the room.
Oh, yeah, he'll be okay? Okay, we're just going to postpone the motion, so you're good. Okay,
Actually, no, he should leave because you're going to present this motion first and then it has to be
then it
amended.
has to be amended, yes, okay. Okay, again, so this is concerning the 1120 Hay Street long-term plan and financial implications. The Committee of the Whole received this report on 1120 Hay Street long-term plan and financial implications, and that committee recommend that council proceed with the sale of the lands that were declared surplus with respect to 1120 Hay Street. And now hopefully we have an amendment.
Yes, I'd like to put an amendment forward that we postpone that to our next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Doesn't need a seconder because it's in cow. Okay.
But you do need to call the question,
but,
or need to call for debate.
Oh, yes. So first of all, debate on that amendment. No debate. All those in favor of postponing? Okay, and motion carries. And,
So, just for clarity, that's being postponed to the Policy and Priorities Committee meeting May 21st?
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob, please. Okay, so that didn't really carry, but
Did they vote?
yeah, they voted. Yeah,
Thank you.
yes, okay.
Okay.
Okay, yep, so now, motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand. That Committee of the Whole received the Community Planning and Development April 2019 report for information. Any discussion on this motion regarding the report?
Which report?
The monthly report.
Which one?
It's the monthly report that we had for April. Right?
This one here.
Yep. Oh, Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a question for the Director of Planning. Seeing as we have the minister's recommendation to put a pause, what is your recommendation with regards to East Fenwick Secondary Plan?
Mr. Mayor, through you, last week the provincial government released a new growth plan. That growth plan will take effect May 16th. and it is continuing to support the, I guess, the density targets that were proposed in the East Fenwick secondary plan area. It doesn't substantially change kind of how we grow with respect to East Fenwick. The growth plan states that 50% of our intensification is to proceed within our existing built-up areas, and then that corresponds that, you know, the remainder of the growth and development would be in our greenfield areas, and the density targets of 50 persons and jobs per hectare is being maintained in the growth plan. Those are the current density targets that are in our official plan in any event, and those are the targets that the East Fenwick secondary plan is proposing to carry forward as well. The province also introduced, gave first reading to what's known as Bill 108, and that will have changes to a number of pieces of legislation. The Planning Act, the Ontario Heritage Act, Environmental Protection Act, the Education Act, Development Charges Act. There's a whole suite of changes. But those changes, again, don't fundamentally impact the policies with respect to the East Fenwick secondary plan. They deal with matters around, for example, changes in the Planning Act are dealing with matters around timeframes for which development applications are processed, the introduction of a community permit planning system, and that's primarily in areas where you're going to provide for increased height and density and provide for community benefits for those, in particular around transit stations and corridors and nodes, which don't really, again, impact on the East Fenwick secondary plan area. So the province has indicated they will also be proceeding with some changes to the provincial policy statement. We haven't seen that yet. We expect that that's probably going to be released sometime this summer. But again, I don't know what those changes would be. Given that the magnitude of the changes in the growth plan do not substantially impact on East Fenwick, I don't know that the changes to the PPS would be significant. There were no changes, of course, to the Greenbelt plan. That stayed in place.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. My only concern was proceeding and then having to make revisions.
I understand that, and certainly if we felt that there's a need to slow the process down or take a pause, we would definitely recommend that. I think the way the plan is currently structured and what I've seen with respect to the changes, there are not significant impacts on the East Fenwick secondary plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess I have one for the Director of Planning. So that edit that came down from the province, did that also, was that the one that included the species at risk?
Yes, Bill 108 is proposing some changes to that legislation in terms of the species at risk and the allotment of time that it takes to provide for the listing of a species at risk, for example, is they're proposing some changes to that. There's some other changes with respect to areas that you take into consideration, areas beyond the provincial border, for example, in terms of species at risk. So you consider populations in adjacent areas, such as in the United States or Manitoba or Quebec, in terms of that. So that has some implications with respect to species at risk. That legislation was introduced Thursday. It received first reading. I'm not exactly sure when second reading will be tabled, and then there will be the debate in the House when the second reading is tabled.
So then the follow-up question, if I remember correctly, in that same plan, species at risk, did they not also propose changes as to how to deal with specific, and that's not the right word, wetland areas? Because if that's the case, I'm thinking that in East Fenwick, that east part of that development, which is kind of a questionable development, do you think that that would
So,
impact that at all?
with respect to the provincially significant wetland,
Yes.
that is still something that's protected.
No.
And there are certainly species at risk in that wetland and on the adjacent lands, and they're primarily plant and tree species that are there. So those, at this point in time, continue to be protected, and there isn't changes being made with respect to the provincially significant wetland.
Okay, great, thank you for that. Any other questions, statements on the community planning report? Okay, Bob, you good? Oh, okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Don't see it. And a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, Corporate Services Monthly Report. The Committee of the Whole received the Corporate Services April 2019 Report for information. Discussion, questions regarding this report. Councillor Kaur.
Yes, I have several questions, and it's dealing with the 2018 fourth quarter financial reports. And the first one is on the revenue side, the supplementary revenue. We budget for 300,000, but we end up only receiving a $172,853 shortfall. We only got 58%. Is there a reason behind that?
Yep. So through you, Mr. Mayor, the budget that, so the supplemental revenues fluctuate from year to year, and normally in the past, we budgeted between 100 and 150,000. In 2017, there was a lot of development that happened, and we picked up a lot of the supplementals, and the actual came in at 376,000. The budget was set at 300, and the budget was just too high. If you see the budget for 2019, we have dropped it back to 175, which is historically where we've been between 100 and 150,000. MPAC is working, they meet with us, with our tax clerk on a monthly basis, and they're trying to move the supplementals quicker, as opposed to being outstanding from the new development. So just the budget last year was not realistic.
And the other question, it relates to the public transit. We budget 165,000 for revenue, and we end up only getting 80,576 of only 49%. And what scares me is that that's only one bus. Again, what was the shortfall on that? And we were told that there was going to be a grant. And I guess it said here provincial gas tax refund for 2008 were below budget for 14. That wasn't below budget. That's a huge difference.
Yep. So I'm just going to defer that to the Deputy Treasurer, Charlotte.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the provincial gas tax that was received in 2017 was $147,000. So we budgeted similarly for 2018, and then we only received approximately $51,000. So that's the majority of the shortfall. We actually were higher than budget on our other revenues, including sponsorships, but the shortfall was the grant revenue.
Okay. And the other question would relate back to public transit. So we estimated the expenditure would be $218,850, but we spent $2,590,000. minus the revenue of 80,000 with the cost, it costs the town $178,000 to run one bus.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Part of the reason for that is that we allocated wages to transit, which we hadn't budgeted it that way. So we needed to demonstrate to the province when we're reporting to them that the town is contributing to that transit program. And part of what we're contributing is the staff time that's going to that. So you'll see the expense there, but not the budget, because we didn't budget it that way last year. For 2019, we did budget it that way. So there's approximately $67,000 in wages in the transit that is above and beyond the expenses that were budgeted, but it's existing staff, so it's not the addition of any staff complement. It's just an allocation.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and to the treasurer, I don't get what she said. So we have a bus driver who goes around the town of Pelham. So you're saying that we have another $78,000 of work being done behind the scenes?
So what I'm saying is, for example, the director of recreation, culture, and wellness, she spends time coordinating the transit program. And previously, we didn't allocate a cost of wages for someone such as herself to that transit program. So we've started to do that so that when we report the transit program to the province to show them what the municipality is contributing towards the cost, it will show that part of what we're contributing is the time of the staff that's going into coordinating and running that program.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so it's not new costs, this is just an allocation of costs. And the reason why it's important, and we learned that from the region this year, is that if we show that the town is contributing $200,000 towards the program, then we can max out on the grant. Like, we actually get the $150,000 for the grant, or the $100,000.
Through you, I don't see a grant in those numbers, what I see today.
Right,
And
so-
what I'm scared, excuse me, so what I'm scared is that gonna double this year? If we're in deficit of $178,000 for one bus, what is two buses gonna cost us?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't have a guarantee what the amount of provincial gas tax will be, but we dropped the budget back down. So for 2019, we did budget the allocated wages, and we reduced the budget of provincial gas tax down to approximately the $51,000. So based on what we did, we anticipate that we would expect the results to be the way it was budgeted, but we don't have guarantees because grants are, subject to their allocation formulas, and we can't guarantee it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is there a possibility of still eliminating that second bus if it's gonna cost us over $100,000?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the second bus, as we demonstrated, shouldn't be increasing the cost of the transit program. I will allow the director to speak about this if she wants to, but I know with the report that we prepared, the second bus is the one that's receiving the MTO grant. So there are two grants that relate to transit. One is the provincial gas tax, and one is the Ministry of Transportation grant. So the second bus is what allows us to get the Ministry of Transportation grant that's supposed to be $100,000 a year for 5 years. And then the other grant, the provincial gas tax, is based on our reporting to them on items such as ridership, as well as what the cost is that the town is contributing towards the transit program.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, so none of the grants are guaranteed?
Well, the Ministry of Transportation grant is a set amount over 5 years. We have an agreement for that. But the gas tax, we know we will be receiving the grant, but the calculation of the amount we receive is based on the financials that we report for the year before, and it gets announced to us after the fact.
So, again, I'm gonna ask the same question. So if Mr. Ford decide to take away those grants, we're gonna be in debt for $100,000, which he has the right to do. Am I right?
What the agreements are signed.
The agreements are signed.
Yeah, so right now, the agreements are signed, yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah, so, can I just, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, Counselor Core, would it be helpful next week when we go to audit committee that we do a separate report on transit? Would
Oh,
that be
yes,
helpful?
definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
We'll do
Thank you,
that. Okay.
appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And the other questions I have is with the 2019, the MCC report. And I really appreciate, at least we're getting a report on a monthly basis now, which we didn't have before. And just going down to the levies, tax levies. So if I'm not mistaken, and if we look at total revenues for I presume this is for March, right? 298,920. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's for January, February, and March for the first quarter. So if you look at the
Oh, so
col-
it's the first quarter. I apologize.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
first quarter. So we broke out the months, January, February, and March. From now on, you'll receive one every month now. You'll receive April in the next month.
Okay, so it's the first quarter,
Quarter.
I presume. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's revenue of $298,920.
Right.
Expenditures are $439,001, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So the negative 317,023, and that's,
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, what this report shows, it shows the first quarter of the year till March 31st, which is 25% of the time that's lapsed. The good news here is that our revenues are coming in at 33%
Yes.
over the period of 25%, and our expenses are at 20% versus 25. So right there, the operating costs are at a positive variance. The bottom part here is, if you recall, Councilor Core, you wanted to see everything related to the MCC. So we're showing the debt activity here. And so the 317,000 actually is revenue from the development charges. So the revenue we received from development charges, and then these are the debenture interest and principal. So it comes out to zero. They net out.
so the 191,485, that's interest.
That's the interest.
We're paying?
That we paid.
For
that
the
we
first
actually paid.
quarter?
Right, and then we paid 125,538 on the principal. But if you add it all up, they net out to zero because the development charges pay for that. So this doesn't impact the tax levy. The other one, the first one, the 288,500 and the 191,768, we haven't paid that yet. When do we pay that? In July?
June and, through you, Mr. Mayor, June and December.
Yeah, so in June, you'll see half of that payment coming out.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say one more comment on this report, if I may, Mr. Mayor. What we're really pleased to see here is the hydro. So if you look at the hydro line, we're at 20% of the budget. So even though 25% of the time has lapsed, I know that a lot of good work's been done with, tweaking things in the building in order to reduce the energy consumption. So that is really a really good news story, that it's at 20%, not at 25%. So there's a savings right there.
And I'm sorry, one more question, I just caught it. The telephone bill for one quarter, $2,409, 58%?
Yeah, so the telephone, through you, Mr. Mayor, the telephone bill, that number includes, I didn't update those notes. Do you have it, Charlotte?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it includes dedicated lines for the elevators. So we are coming in a little bit over budget on that because we budgeted for the phone lines for the operations, but we also have to have dedicated lines for the elevators.
So I think that those lines could have actually went towards the elevator cost of maintenance, but right now he's putting all of the telephone costs under telephone.
So I appreciate it, it's a lot better than a couple months ago. So thank you for your hard work.
You're welcome.
Councilor Hildebrand, did I see?
Yes, I had a question about the revenues and the water revenues and the wastewater revenues for 2019.
Okay. Yes, so right now, through you, Mr. Mayor, we only have, the billing was only done for January and February. The next billing is being done in May. So this report here is only showing 2 billings.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's 1 month on, 1 month off.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, in the MCC report, other revenues, what would that consist of? Is that just a,
So through you, Mr. Mayor, 30,000 of that is the advertising revenue. And then, Vicky, what's the other part of the other revenues?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Also, any special events like theater series, comedy night, things like that. Concession rentals,
oh, okay, so that's not under multi, okay.
advertising.
Okay, any other questions concerning the corporate services monthly report? If not, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of receiving it for information? And all those against? Okay, thank you. Put forward by Lisa Hahn, by Councillor Hahn. Fire and Bylaw Services Monthly Report. The Committee of the Whole received the Fire and Bylaw Services April 2019 report for information. Any comments or questions on the Fire and Bylaw report? Councillor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Under the odor investigations, so the month of April, there was 0 complaint?
That's correct. We didn't have anybody register anything through our system. We do get, random phone calls.
Yep.
People and yeah, there are, but, actually, we were talking, earlier about the systems. There are, friends on Foss Road. I haven't, heard any complaints at all about them in the last while. I think they have their systems done and corrected, and to the point we're not omitting any orders at all, but we have another operation that doesn't seem to have it right, and those were most of the complaints are coming from the Belfour operation.
Getting a lot.
Okay.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, another question. If I've been getting several complaints, I don't know if this goes through bylaw, where construction trucks and equipment in subdivisions starting early, like at 7 in the morning. Is that related to the bylaw in here? I don't see a category for that.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We handle that, it's under the noise bylaw. So we have addressed, a few other councilors have come to us and indicated there's a couple construction sites that start before 7. So the start time is 7. And then there's no construction allowed on holidays. Sunday, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, but for the rest of the days of the week, it's 7 in the morning they can start. So we've had some reports where as early as 5:30.
Yeah.
So we've investigated them, we've talked to the contractors, the developers, whoever the people that have been, and they've all agreed that 7 o'clock is the correct time.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the chief, how is the new communication radios working out that we purchased for you?
Our radios, our fire
Yes,
radios,
that we spent 350,000 or something?
312.
safe,
Yes, to keep you safe.
money well spent.
Yes, I'd just like to know how they're doing. Are they in play?
Fantastic, 100%. We don't have any dead areas. I think I've said this before. We're not dropping calls. I have not received one complaint from any officer or firefighter that they've had difficulties communicating with the new system. It's like 100% improvement from our old system.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Stewart.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the noise for construction, 7 o'clock in the morning, but at night, what is the cutoff time for noise for parties and such?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's broken out in a couple different things. So some of the noise is 11 o'clock at night, and some of the noise is earlier times. It depends on what type of noise.
Okay, yeah.
So
a house
amplified
party.
noise, like parties, house parties, stuff like that, it's 11.
Okay.
And I encourage, if I can expand a little bit on this, we've received a few over the weekend. We don't have bylaw officers that work late at night. so it's a police matter. So we encourage residents that are complaining to call the police. And they will send a cruiser out to, and then they report back to us. We've received that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor, no? Okay, any more?
Yeah,
Counselor
sorry,
Trophy?
sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't see that column for noise complaints here, where how many we had or anything like that. Am I missing? Maybe I'm looking in the wrong spot. I don't see it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we don't have a specific line in the complaint. It's general bylaw complaints. At the top, the first block, it'll be general complaints.
Okay.
It's an Excel spreadsheet, so if you prefer us to break it out further and have a noise line, we can easily do that. It's not.
Well, I see the odor investigations, rescue, grass, brush fire. Yeah, if you can do a line for the noise complaints, that would be helpful for me.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, call the questions. Committee of the Whole received the fire services report for information. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Motion put forward by Councillor Kaur. That committee, Partners for Climate Protection Milestone Tool Joining Resolution. The Committee of the Whole received the PCP Milestone Tool Joining Resolution May 6, 2019, and the committee recommend that council confirms the municipality's participation in the PCP program to FCM. Debate, questions on this proposal? No? Okay, I'll call the motion on this then. Committee of the Whole received the committee recommend the council confirms the municipality's participation in the program to FCM. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Motion put forward by Councilor Trophy, 2019 Gypsy Moth Control Program Cost Recovery. The Committee of the Whole received the 2019 Gypsy Moth Infestation Cost Recovery Process Report, and that committee recommend to Council that staff be directed to recover the cost of aerial spraying of private properties within the identified urban spray areas in response to the gypsy moth infestation by evenly distributing the cost to spray private property to all affected property owners. That staff be directed to apply the cost of aerial spraying to the 2019 property tax bill for all properties within the identified urban spray areas. Comments and questions on this report? Councillor Trophy.
Yeah, I put that motion forward just to get it on the floor, but the last time that we were here, we talked about spraying the urban area and the rural area. And from my understanding, I had several calls. The people in the rural area, which is in Ward 1, are not being treated the same as the people in Fun Hill. They're being quoted, and it's in the area where it's severe, at $510, $550, somewhere at $1,000, and this, I know the property might be a little bit larger, but it's far from the $216. And I specifically remember we used the term fair and consistent across the board.
Director of Public Works, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had discussions, and I've been trying to wrap my head around the pricing on this as well. Trees Unlimited, we've had several meetings with them to discuss the pricing. The property owners in the rural areas are actually getting it at a cheaper rate than what the urban property owners are getting, based on the size of the properties that are being sprayed. So I think with a rural property, your first 3 acres is covered under the $510 for the first 3 acres. And then it basically, based on the number of acres you have, there's a range that the price increases. above and beyond that. So when you work out the actual price per acre for the rural property, it's at a much cheaper rate than what you'd be spraying in the urban areas. And the reasons for that is the material is a material. And just to give everybody some kind of level of comfort around the material that we're spraying, I believe it's roughly 3 bottles of beer in volume for every acre that they're spraying. So that's kind of the amount of product that they're putting down. So the material costs are material costs, but the main difference between the cost between a rural spray and an urban spray is that the rural spray can be done with single engine aircraft, and where they can fly in over rural areas that they're not over urban properties or houses, more densely populated areas. In the urban areas, you need to apply the product with dual engine aircrafts, which is the dual engine helicopters, and the access points to the urban areas becomes more difficult. So the cost of application in the urban areas is actually more than what the cost of application is in the rural areas. So some of the prices for some of the rural lots seem to be larger, but when you break it down on a per acre basis, it's actually at a reduced rate.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, so I personally know of a home that's approximately 1 acre, and they're paying $500, and then when somebody has 3 acres, they're still paying the $510. And just, there's that range, 1 to 3 acres.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong here, so the average, and I call it average, lot in the urban area is .245, I believe.
Yeah, correct. Just under, through you, Mr. Mayor, just under
Go
0.3.
ahead and take it, yeah, go
Just
ahead.
under 0.3 acres, correct.
Yes. So those people at that size are paying, well, have we got the base, is it 265? Is that the price we ended up at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the last report we came forward with it, well, actually this report, it gives a range of cost. We are still fielding requests from the public on the spray areas. Our consultant, Trees Unlimited, is working with the town, and we've kind of narrowed in those areas now, the spray blocks that we're going to be performing the sprays in. As of right now, we're still looking at using those shape files to develop the actual number of properties that we're going to be spraying outside of our own properties. So that unit rate it's the cost to do the spraying in the urban areas is about $63,000. So based on the number of homes that we determine that are within that spray block, we'll determine the cost per unit. We were estimating somewhere between 250 to 300 houses within those blocks, and that's how we get that range of $225 to $275 per property. So we should have finalized those numbers, the actual number of units, probably by tomorrow. But it'll be that's the kind of the range that we're looking at that would be attributed to the urban properties. Yeah, 225 to 275, and again, that's based on the area of the actual cost unit price that the Trees Unlimited and Zimmer are giving us for doing the urban properties are $625 per acre, compared to if you take that $510 divided by 3 acres for a rural area, you're somewhere in the order of $160, $180, $200 per acre. So it is more costly to do it in the urban area.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a little bit inaccurate because they got one set price that's for 1 to 3 acres. It's $510, whether you have 1 acre right on
Up to 3 acres.
or 3 acres. Now, several of the people that I'm talking about, and I had a lot of complaints about, live right on Canberra Road, and they're probably at the 1 acre mark, and it's going right in to town. So between Balfour all the way up to past Center Street, right through there. And all those homes there, they're severely infested, and they're all getting charged minimum $510.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in consultation with Trees Unlimited, that's the program, the pricing that they've developed based on the aircraft that's got to come in to do the spraying. It was $510 for the first 3 acres for the rural areas outside of the urban boundaries.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, he also did mention that people that were doing ground spraying for individual trees we're going between $100 and $200 a tree if you're doing the ground spraying, so.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, did we send out an RFP for this, or was just Trees Unlimited was the only?
They're the only guys in town, same as the aircraft, Zimmer Airlines. They're the only ones. There is nobody.
It's a good business to be into.
Well, if you sat down with them, you would realize that, but go ahead, Councilor Court.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to either the treasurer or the public work director. So total cost is $63,937, and we budget $25,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the actual cost of the program before taxes is roughly $78,000. The town has budgeted $25,000 towards the spraying for the gypsy moth. That also included the initial infestation survey that was completed by Trees Unlimited, as well as the public open houses that we've had and the coordination efforts required to put this program together. Those costs for that part of the program are not being charged back to the property owners. That's being completed by the town. So when you look at the actual cost and subtract out the town-owned lands, the urban areas themselves, the rural residents have established their own program through Trees Unlimited. So they've contacted Paul Robertson from Trees Unlimited directly. They've set up their own program. We have no involvement with the rural property owners. So we're spraying our properties and in the parks and the urban areas. And when we did our infestation survey of those areas, we've identified severe infestations for the abutting adjacent property owners. So that $63,000 is the cost that's attributed to the areas outside of our lands. So when you take that $63,000, you divide it by your number of homes, which are in those spray box, which I'm estimating to be 250 to 300 at this point in time. That's where we get that range of $225 to $275 per urban property. So the $63,000 is the cost to do the urban lands.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer, we can't find $63,000 in our community? Because we're just going to open a can of worms here. One person's going to say they get charged $500. The next person's going to get charged $218. And I personally think we own it. And when I went to the residents, and I was shocked to see the infestation on these trees. And, you know, we did not spray for the last 11 years. We only invested less than $8,000. And we need to find money. So this way for the next year and next year, we could budget $100,000. So we don't have to have this dissension between our citizens and saying who's paying what. And not only that, these trees are all of Fawn Hill. It's just not the people that live beside the parks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the 63,000 is only the urban portion. I don't know what the total dollar is for the rural area.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do not have that number.
Right, so if you're gonna do it, I would assume you
But
wanna
I
do both.
thought the urban areas that the,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have not had any cost discussions with Trees Unlimited with respect to the program he set up with the rural property owners. They have done that on their own. We don't have that number. I don't have that number for you tonight, what that cost would be, that the rural homeowners are contracting Trees Unlimited directly for.
but those spraying is on private property. In these people own, 25 acres and they have a wooded area.
Correct.
Okay, but what I'm asking is that we pick up the bill of people who back onto our parks were infested and now it's in their front yard.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in discussions with Trees Unlimited, the gypsy moth, and I'm not an expert, but the gypsy moth does spread through the air. To say that, I think it's an assumption that could be made to say that our infestation of our parks has caused the infestation of adjacent property owners. But in talking with Trees Unlimited today, that's not that wouldn't be the case. To answer your question on spending, we have spent $83,000 in the last 10 years. So we did a spray program in 2009, which was very similar to the size of the spray program we're doing right now. In 2018, we did a spray of just few of our parks, and that was in the order of $8,000. So Over the past 10 years, we have spent somewhere in the order of 83,000 on the Gypsy Moth program. We did speak to Trees Unlimited regarding the frequency of the spraying that needs to be completed. Again, it's something that doesn't need to be sprayed for every year, and you probably would not get approvals through the Ministry of Environment for spraying every year. Although the chemical that's used to treat the gypsy moths it's relatively environmentally friendly. It's actually a chemical that's found in the soil, but to have a program that would require or request to have that chemical sprayed every year would probably be not looked upon very happily by the Ministry of Environment. So it's something that you treat when your infestation levels get to a certain level. To say we're not spending appropriately, I think is kind of a unfair statement.
Thank you.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer, so we don't have the money to do this on our own as a city?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just texting the deputy there. So we can go back and look at the grants that we received and the capital budgets to see if there is 63,000. My only concern is, does that appear equitable to the urban folks? That's my concern here. I mean, the rural folks, yeah. Do you want us to get the number from Trees Unlimited on what the total cost is for the town? You want to know what the
Yes,
magnitude of that
yes.
number is?
That would be a good idea.
Okay, so we can bring that back. And,
But if I'm not mistaken, spraying on private property, through you, Mr. Mayor, there could be two private properties side by side, and there is no town lines or town lands in between.
that's correct.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so these individuals are trying to save their own wooded areas. So they're spending, I could see that, but why are we gonna pick that up?
Okay, so you're saying because it's adjacent to the town property?
That's right.
That
we
should be
should pick it
covered.
up, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna disagree with my fellow counselor here. And the only reason because I understand his point if you're in a farm, but we're talking right down Memorial Drive in Fenwick and right down Campbell Road, where the oak trees line that road from right through the village of Fenwick, right into Pelham. And those trees there, if one of the residents wanted to go cut them down, they'd have to get a permit because they're on boulevard of the town. But now they're infested with moths, then they're gonna be gypsy moths. They're gonna have to pay the 510 to do the acre, and everybody in the urban area is gonna get theirs free. I think it should be consistent right through. If we're gonna cover the cost, which I'm okay if we see what the number is, but we need to do the people on Memorial and Canberra right in the village of Fenwick as well, and right through Cherry Ridge.
For the Cherry Ridge people that have the lots at 2.45, they're paying the same price. The people that are paying more are the people with the bigger lots. I know there's one gentleman in Fenwick who has been phoning up the consultant quite a bit, and he's got 1.6 acres. Well, of course, he's going to be paying more for that 1.6 acres than the person with the 2.5. He doesn't want to, but if we're going to keep it fair on a per acre basis, this guy at 2.4, why should this guy with 1.6 get it for the same price? It's the people that are paying more. Their lots are bigger than the .241. He checks it all out on the town maps, and
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't go, you can have 2 acres and have 3 trees on it, am I right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna pay $500, okay, I don't see the reason behind why we charge by acres, and I understand that, but it just,
well, Council, I dare say that if you have a helicopter, it's pretty hard to go by the tree.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The rural areas, like I said, we haven't had any discussions with Trees Unlimited with respect to organizing and strategizing around a rural spray program. These are residents that have contacted Trees Unlimited directly to set up the spray programs and have talked about the pricing. We don't have anything to do with that, with the rural
So
properties.
why interfere?
Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know it's a very complex issue, and I think since the rural people are paying, the urban people should pay. That's my feeling.
Thank you.
I mean, if you have to spray, you have to spray. But
Thank you. Councilor Wayne?
So my concern is how, forget about the discussion that we've had so far, how equitable it is to spread this money over 250 landowners or whatever, and you've got one individual who may have a home that's 70 by 140, and you've got another piece of property here on Canberra to Concord that's 3.6 acres. There's another farm across the road that's huge, and why should the person in the residential property be paying 250, 260, whatever it is, when you've got these other big chunks of land? It's those smaller property owners that are subsidizing the larger property owners.
No?
Sure they are.
Well, they're not. Not according to the guy on Trout Unlimited. He goes through each lot and he says, this is the size of the lot, and that's what he pays. And then as you get further out from the urban area, but still in the urban boundaries, this guy has 1.5 acres. This is what he pays.
I'm not talking, so,
No, that's not what.
sorry, I think you're missing it. So if you look at the map on North Font Hill that was provided in the package, there's parcels of land along Canberra Road that are huge, that are in the urban area, that will be charged $260 or whatever, yet someone with a smaller, very much smaller residential lot, we're talking residential, is gonna be paying the same price, which doesn't seem fair to me. Additionally, you've got a large condominium corporation on Highway 20, and behind them, there's a huge wooded lot that would be sprayed, yet that entire condominium corporation is going to be charged as if it was one residential lot of 70 by 140. Doesn't seem equitable to me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, if you look at that map, you see that there's large lots there. So the way the program was divided was that we had an urban program that we were looking at with Trees Unlimited, and then the rural program was being completed with the individual property owners dealing directly with Trees Unlimited. So we can, as staff, we can go back and take a look and try to come up with a more equitable split, whether or not these properties that we are showing on Canberra Road would have the rural application rates applied. I would need to discuss that with Trees Unlimited with respect to the type of aircraft they need to bring in to do that spraying. But I understand your point that those properties are larger than their 0.25 acres, and so that their fair share of $225 to $275, whatever it is, may not be equitable based on the size of their property. So the way the estimate and the program was set up was that we looked at an urban area within the urban boundary and the infested areas, and those were calculated based on the urban spray rates of $625 per acre. So obviously staff can go back and take a look at some of those properties. For the majority of the areas that we're going to spray in the urban areas, that'll be around that 0.3 acre size lot, but there would be the exception that staff could look at and bring back to council.
Thank you.
Councilor Hahn?
To you, Mr. Mayor, and to the director, I'm going to assume that we did some research as far as other municipalities beyond just, I think you said West Lincoln. There's probably, a dozen or more across, probably far more than that across Ontario, that are dealing with similar situations and have been in previous years. So, again, I'm assuming that we researched this, because it seems like we're kind of kind of reinventing the wheel here, and there probably is another town out there that is similar situation, and they've got this right down to a science because they've done it for many, many years in a row, and perhaps we should be looking at best practices here, no?
So for you, Mr. Mayor, this was the recommendation that came from Trees Unlimited with all the experience and how they've dealt with other municipalities. So this is how they deal with the urban area, is by household.
But they predominantly do Niagara area, don't they?
No, they don't just do Niagara, they do other areas as well.
They do all 6 nations. They go all the way to the other side of Caledonia.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in talking with Trees Unlimited, Pelham is actually kind of a unique area as well to deal with this infestation. The same principles are being applied to West Lincoln, and then there's a band that extends through West Lincoln, through Haldeman, out through 6 Nations. A lot of those areas have large rural areas that are infested, that are being sprayed with rural applications, and it just happens that Pelham's in an area where we've got some densely populated areas that are infested. So the urban area is kind of a little bit unique with respect to the spray programs that are happening in this area, but the same principles are being applied to West Lincoln as well with respect to the portion of costs with respect to the program.
So, yeah, so further to that, say if you take, I don't know, Beamsville or Grimsby, for instance, we're not all that different, and then they have a huge rural area as well. They are applying the same cost.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any spray programs in Grimsby or Beamsville. It's a kind of a very defined area that's being infested.
I'm gonna bring you another bottle.
Did you want us?
No, that's, any other discussion on this? I think it is correct to point out that we are spraying 250 private homeowners. Am I correct on that approximately?
Minimum.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was the early estimate. I would expect that the number of properties that would be benefiting from our urban spray program would be in the order of 300 homes.
Yeah. So out of that number, myself, I've had maybe 10 phone calls, 10 emails. 3 of them were ecstatic that their property was being sprayed. Bill me whatever you need. And then I get 3 or 4 other ones that have been sending out email day after day after day. But remember the number we are dealing with. We are dealing with 250 homeowners. We're not dealing with 3 or 4 homeowners. We're dealing with 250. So myself, this Tree Unlimited guy, he's in the business. He's not favoring urban over rural. He's trying to be as equitable as he can. Honestly, and like I say, you don't spray every year. It's a cycle. Some years you have to spray. Next year, if it's a dry year, you don't spray. They won't even allow you to spray. So to say that we don't have a spray program, the spray program exists when the egg masses are counted. That's when you spray. That's not just something I'm making up. That's what the law is. You have to get permits from Health, from Air Canada, and from the Ministry of the Environment. And if you don't have the egg masses, they will not allow you to spray.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not arguing about spraying or not, just the cost to our residents. That why can't we pick it up? I'm not arguing. I think it's important we spray. It's how we, without opening a can of worms and put one neighbor against another neighbor and find the $63,000. So, moving forward, I just, and maybe you're absolutely right, I'm not an expert, but I'm just looking for $63,000 that we could, smooth this over until the next time we need to spray. That's all. I think it's important to spray, but could we not just find $63,000, Teresa? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I could bring something back on May 21st and look into it. So you just want just the 63,000 then, not look at the rural?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, you're telling me the rural went by themselves,
Yeah,
or
they did, yeah.
they contact. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, with that rural thing again, there was a form that was available last year about gypsy moth in infested areas. And people right through the whole village of Fenwick there sent in these forms to see if their area was infested. And it was, some of them, the homes weren't even checked or nothing. But what I'm saying is, if everybody through the village of Fenwick, they have a severely infested area on Campbell Road, and they're picking up their cost. That's the only thing, you know, I just want to be consistent and fair with all the taxpayers.
I agree with you.
And I think,
So,
like, if they got a 30-acre farm, okay, but I'm talking all the houses right along Campbell Road.
no, is that for her? Or for me? Oh, okay, wait, I got a note here. Let me read this first. Jason, what? If I check it, oh, there's some packs of spray.
Just ask the director to.
Oh,
comment
yes.
on the-
So, we have spray dates coming up. That's the only thing. Luckily, because of the wet, cold weather, they're about 2 weeks maximum delayed. So usually they would be spraying this weekend, I believe he said. But he's talked to area fruit farmers, and they have told him that their trees are at least 2 weeks back. Now, if we have 2 or 3 days, 4 days of plus 70 weather, which isn't in the forecast, then all of a sudden the egg masses could probably start hatching. But, correct, Jason?
Yes, that's correct. So we're anticipating the spray program to start near the end of May and would continue into the middle of June. That would be the kind of the window based on our discussions with Trees Unlimited today. Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just to answer one of the councilor's questions, Councilor Kaur. I've texted and trying to get some information from Paul Robertson from Trees Unlimited, and he estimates he's still finalizing the numbers and has to get the contracts back from the rural property owners that want to participate in the spray program. But he's anticipating that that area will be about 600 acres of rural spray program in the town of Pelham.
So, quick, do some math for us, Jason.
90,000.
About 90,000 in the rural.
$100,000, right?
102,000, you're close.
Yeah. So add that to the 63. So if we wanted to pick up everybody in the town, it would be
2,000 plus 63.
170,000.
170.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the 600 acres, the town hasn't participated in a spray program with Trees Unlimited, so that would be property owners in the rural areas that have contacted Trees Unlimited wanting to participate in the spray program. So that 600 acres would only be property owners in the rural areas that wanted to participate in the spray program. It may not be all the areas that are infested.
Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree that they're the ones that want to participate, because I actually talked to a few people. And the one woman has to walk out to her car with an umbrella. That's how bad they're infested, because they're just falling everywhere. So it's not that they're just doing it just because.
Okay, well, we have to make a decision here, so either, and we got 5 minutes and we gotta do our curfew thing. So, I guess we'll vote on it, and then we'll see if, so here's what we're voting on. The Committee of the Whole received the 2019 Gypsy Moth Infestation Cost
I thought we were
Recovery.
gonna get, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I thought we were gonna get some numbers from you, Teresa, before we
Well,
vote
so
on it.
what we have to decide, if we start spraying in 2 weeks, so are we gonna, so I guess if we're gonna get numbers, then we're gonna spray regardless and then get the numbers
Yeah,
after.
we're spraying, and then we'll sort,
Yes,
we'll
we'll
sort the.
sort the numbers out after.
Okay,
Spraying's happening.
yeah, okay. So then, so then, this has got the cost recovery on here, so what do you think we should do about that? I'll just have to take that one out.
So you would,
No.
you would need to do an amendment so that staff be directed to recover the cost of aerial spraying of private properties within the identified urban spray areas. That staff be requested to report back on that, because
I don't know, I think we just will have to, just have an amendment
Teresa, what do you,
that, because it all talks about, cost
Teresa,
recovery.
do you consider the village of Fenwick urban?
We don't even know if we're gonna do cost
Or the
recovery.
rural?
You know what, you tell me what you want,
I'm
I'll
just
see how
asking.
much money I have. I'll bring back the money.
So, I would just suggest that an amendment be added that staff report back on the, further report on the cost recovery analysis.
Also, just that committee recommend to council that staff report back and forget about this.
So members of council, the motion before you is that staff be directed to recover the cost of aerial spraying of private properties within the identified urban spray areas in response to the gypsy moth infestation, and by evenly distributing the cost to spray private property to all affected property owners, that staff be directed to apply the cost of aerial spraying to the 2019 property tax bill for all properties within the identified spray areas. If there was an amendment, to direct staff to report back on
If
other
there are
cost recovery options, then if that changes, then you would know it by next council. But that would need an amendment to this.
I'll put that amendment forward.
So Councillor Kaur. And that staff be directed to report back on alternative. Teresa, how do you want that worded? On alternative
Options?
financing options?
Yeah, financing options. If there are additional funds in the budget to cover the costs for the urban, this is just the urban area, or you want to know
Nope.
All
that'd be-
options.
Let's do rural.
everything?
Yes.
Okay. The total cost for
And
the
the staff
town.
be directed to report back on alternative financing options and whether additional funds are available to cover the cost of the program
For the town. But this is for the whole town.
for the town.
Yep, okay.
So, Councillor Kaur, is that amendment acceptable?
Yes, thank you.
So now you vote on the amendment, then the motion as amended.
So we're voting on Councilor Kaur's amendment. All those in favor? Okay, and now the whole.
Motion as amended.
The motion as amended, which basically is, about.
So it's this motion plus that extra
Oh,
paragraph.
okay, so I'll read the whole thing in. That committee of the whole received the 2019 gypsy moth infestation cost recovery process report, and that committee recommend to council that staff be directed to recover the cost of aerial spraying of private properties within the identified urban spray areas in response to the gypsy moth infestation by evenly distributing the cost to spray private property to all affected property owners. That staff be directed to apply the cost of aerial spraying to the 2019 property tax bill for all properties within the identified urban areas, followed by.
And that staff be directed to report back on alternative financing options and whether additional funds are available to cover the cost of the program for the town.
Okay, all those, also, have you voted on the amendment? Yeah, you
The
voted.
amendment has been
Okay,
voted,
so now
yes.
on the motion, on the amended motion. I'm gonna, yeah. Okay, passes, thank you.
And now you need a motion to extend curfew.
Yes. Thank you.
It's on the wrong color paper.
Yes, so now it is 10 o'clock right on, so we need a motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand that the rules of procedure as contained in the Town of Pelham procedural bylaw be suspended and that the specified meeting curfew time of 10 p.m. be and is hereby waived, and that the remainder of the business listed on the agenda for this meeting continue to be considered until, of course, we got this, or all matters have been concluded. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, all in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay, back to the green ones. Motion put forward by Councilor Trophy, Public Works Monthly Report. The Committee of the Whole received the Public Works and Utilities April 2019 report for information, discussion, or questions on this report. Councilor Kaur.
Yes, is there a possibility of giving a statement for the cost of transit per month? I think I asked for that last month. Instead of finding out how many people ride the bus, could we find out what it costs us per month?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, Jason got up. He thought he was going to answer, but you got him.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I heard numbers, finance, I thought it was just automatically me.
Any other questions, comments on the Public Works? Okay, so let's, I'll call the vote on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
We'll do a
It isn't a
special
motion, is
transit
it?
resolution.
It's a recommendation.
Recommendation, thank you. Recommendation put forward by Councilor Corr, Recreation, Culture, and Wellness Monthly Report, that Committee of the Whole receive the Recreation, Culture, and Wellness April 2019 report for information. Comments or questions? Councilor Corr.
Yes, through you to the director. Pickleball, volleyball, badminton, and Zumba. We got 2,610. Isn't that part of the MCC revenue? And same with the public skating? Wouldn't that be part, why does it show up in two balance sheets?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this was our first time that we have split the programming and the, with the corporate services report. And this actually goes to April and not just to March, but if council would like, we will leave all programming off of our,
Or we could put it in yours.
well, I'd rather it be one report instead of two. Council just needs to realize what it is, and next month we'll get it.
I appreciate, because it just makes more sense. If it's a revenue base that came from the MCC, then it should be reported on the MCC
And
balance sheet.
it is reported, through you, Mr. Mayor, it is reported on the MCC.
Just confusing why it's showed in two spots.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope this isn't a silly one, but 2019, swim group and swim semi-private. I wasn't sure about swimming in 2019. Is there a pool operating? Are we renting something, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we've done is, this has started all of the registrations for the summer.
Oh, for the summer.
So basically, yeah, we're not open yet, but this is registration so far.
That's coming in so far.
It's come in so far, that's all.
Okay.
Okay. Councilor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director, just wondering, yoga I didn't see was on here, but I know it exists. And hopefully Pilates, just wondering, can you speak to any new programs that will be coming down the pipe in the next while?
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually, this is a good question, because I need to understand council's direction. When we were contemplating on building the facility, it was our direction that we would never compete against another business in town. It's a community center. And what we do is we assess the programs that we're running. We see who else is running the same program in the community, and that's how we determine what programs we will run. In saying that, we started yoga and chair yoga, and the community loved it. Although the day after, there was a business right away that called us and said, hey, what are you doing? And we have met with that business, and we are working with that business so that the program is a little different than what they're running. But I just need council's direction, because we would really like to offer many programs, although we do have to watch what we're doing, because we do not want to compete against local business either.
So further to that, I know you and I have had the conversation in the past, for instance, Pilates. And if you look, there's no other Pilates in town. The only other Pilates in town is across from the fire hall. I can't remember the name of it, but you'll know the
Yeah,
name of it.
Movement Unlimited.
But they're nowhere near in the price range that we would offer a program. They're very, very expensive, like $30, $40 per time. We wouldn't be charging $34 per time. So we need to be able to offer affordable programs to residents, and that's just not an offering right now for that particular program.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and that is exactly the conversation that we had with them when we met with them. And so they were somewhat acceptable of what we were doing. So in saying that, we will further our programming. We, and Teresa also mentioned that we did meet with Brock with regard to programming that they could bring to us as well through their kinesiology students. So that will be a different program. So we're trying to be unique and offer programs that are affordable and on the other hand, not affecting local business.
Sure. Plus, you don't use equipment. So if we offered it, we wouldn't be using equipment. They use equipment for their Pilates.
Correct.
So,
The
expensive
equipment that we would be using would be portable equipment that we can put away. So it is
Very
definitely different.
Yeah.
Councilor Stewart?
Mr. Mayor, I understand how that agreement was put in place to not compete, but can we put something in place so that if one of these businesses closes or a different business comes into town, that they're excluded from the non-competition because they came in afterwards?
Mr. Mayor, we don't really have an agreement.
Well,
just,
it's a verbal
practice,
agreement.
if you want to call it
Yeah.
a practice. And exactly, that's exactly what we do. I mean, you know, like Zumba. We had Zumba prior to anyone else starting. And once other businesses started Zumba, well, then they complained that we were offering Zumba. Although we do have clients, we're not going to just cancel and say, well, you have to go there now. So, you know, it is a touchy subject, but we try to work with every situation and do the best we can to offer additional programming.
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm just playing my pen.
Just putting your pen. Okay, without further questions, then I'll call the motion to vote. That committee of the whole receive the Recreation, Culture, and Wellness April 29 report for information. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, a motion or recommendation put forward by Councillor Hahn. Clerk's Department Monthly Report, Monday, May 6, 2019. The Committee of the Whole received the Clerk's Department April 2019 report for information. Questions or comments?
None. Take it personally. I'm not.
Okay, not seeing any. Then I will call the question to a vote. All those in favor? Great. All those opposed? Thank you. Okay, recommendation by Councillor Hildebrand that this regular meeting of committee be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for May 21st, 2019, following council. All those in favor? Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned.
Let's hold on.
So, Mr. Mayor, I need to know what you want to do with the closed session meeting that recessed from council.
Yeah. So, well, we actually have to have it